I am Dana Mitchell, 27 years old, sitting in my late Uncle Robert's while reading surrounded by vultures disguised as family. The mahogany table gleams under chandelier light while my relatives lean forward, eyes glinting with greed. Despite everything, I had hope. Uncle Robert always said I was special. Then Mr. Peterson announced my inheritance. $10. 10. The room erupted in laughter. Cousin Jason slapped his knee. Aunt Margaret smirked. I wanted to disappear. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe if you want more stories about family betrayal turned sweet justice. Growing up in the Mitchell family meant knowing your place in the hierarchy of wealth. My place was always at the bottom, not because I was poor by normal standards, but because I chose a different path than what was expected of the Mitchell legacy. Uncle Robert was the exception. He was my father's older brother and the family patriarch after my grandparents passed away. While the rest of the family treated me like a disappointment, Uncle Robert seemed to see something in me that others missed. I still remember the day he gave me my first camera when I was 12. It was a simple digital camera, nothing fancy. But it changed my life. Dana, he had said, his blue eyes twinkling beneath bushy white eyebrows, some people see the world in dollars and cents. But you, my dear, you see the world through frames and moments. Never lose that. The Mitchell empire was built on real estate and investments. My grandfather had started with one apartment building in downtown Boston and expanded until the Mitchell name was on some of the most prestigious properties in New England. Uncle Robert had doubled the family fortune through smart investments and business diversification. The family expected all Mitchell children to study business or finance and join the company. I studied photography instead. My decision created a rift that never healed. My parents tried to be supportive, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes. They had passed away in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving me even more isolated from the family. Only Uncle Robert maintained contact, occasionally inviting me to his penthouse where he would ask about my latest projects while the rest of the family discussed business over expensive wine. Aunt Margaret, Uncle Robert's sister, was particularly vocal about my career choice. Photography is a hobby, Dana, not a profession, she would say with a dismissive wave of her bejeweled hand. Her children, Heather and Jason, had followed the proper Mitchell path. Heather was a financial analyst, and Jason worked directly under Uncle Robert in the family business. Lawrence Davenport was Uncle Robert's business partner and closest friend. He wasn't family, but he might as well have been for all the influence he wielded. He regarded me with the same mixture of pity and contempt as the rest of them. Through it all, Uncle Robert remained my ally, though a distant one. He never financially supported my photography career, which was something I was actually proud of. I wanted to make it on my own merits, but he would call occasionally to check in, and sometimes I would spot him at gallery showings where my work was featured, though he would disappear before I could approach him. Our last conversation happened just 3 weeks before his death. It was strange. He had called me late on a Tuesday evening. Dana, my dear, how are you? His voice had sounded tired. I am okay, Uncle Robert. Working on a new series about urban isolation. How are you feeling? I had heard from Heather that he had been ill. Oh, this old body is just reminding me of its age, he had chuckled. I wanted to tell you that I saw your exhibition at the Hamilton Gallery last month. Your work has matured beautifully. I was shocked. You were there? Why didn't you say hello? There was a pause. I prefer to observe sometimes. Dana, I want you to know that I am proud of you. You followed your passion despite the pressure. That takes courage. Thank you, Uncle Robert. That means a lot coming from you. Another pause. I have always believed that true wealth is not what you own, but who you are. Remember that, won't you? At the time, I thought he was just being philosophical. Now, I wonder if he was trying to tell me something. The call about his death came on a rainy Thursday morning. Uncle Robert had passed away in his sleep at 72. The call about the will reading came a week later. I almost didn't go. What was the point? I knew Uncle Robert cared for me, but I had no expectations of an inheritance. Besides, I didn't want to deal with the family's judgment. My one-bedroom apartment with its converted closet darkroom was a far cry from the Mitchells' standard of living. But something pulled me there. Maybe it was a need for closure. Maybe it was the faint hope that Uncle Robert would have left me some small token of affection. A book, perhaps, or one of his landscape photographs that I had always admired. I never expected what actually happened. The law firm of Peterson, Goldstein, and Walsh occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Boston. I felt underdressed the moment I stepped into the marble lobby. My black dress was appropriate for a well reading, but lacked the designer label that Aunt Margaret and Heather sported. The receptionist directed me to the conference room on the top floor. When I entered, the family was already there, clustered in groups, speaking in hushed tones. Aunt Margaret sat at the head of the table, naturally assuming the position of authority now that Uncle Robert was gone. Her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and her navy suit probably cost more than my rent. Jason and Heather stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, admiring the view of Boston Harbor. Lawrence Davenport was engaged in conversation with a man I didn't recognize but assumed was another business associate. No one acknowledged my arrival except for Heather, who gave me a small, tight smile before returning to her conversation with Jason. I took a seat at the far end of the table and tried to make myself invisible. At precisely 10 o'clock, Mr. Peterson entered the room. He was a tall, thin man with round glasses and a solemn expression that seemed permanently etched onto his face. He carried a leather portfolio and was accompanied by a younger associate who wheeled in a cart with what I assumed were documents related to Uncle Robert's estate. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Peterson said, taking his position at the head of the table opposite Aunt Margaret. "We are gathered here today to discuss the last will and testament of Robert James Mitchell. Before we begin, I would like to express my condolences to the family. Mr. Mitchell was not only a valued client, but a friend." There were appropriate murmurs of acknowledgement around the table. "Now, let us proceed." Mr. Peterson opened his portfolio and adjusted his glasses. "The will is quite straightforward." Mr. Mitchell was very specific about his wishes. The distribution began. Aunt Margaret received the summer house in Cape Cod, which surprised no one. She had always loved that house and had spent every summer there since they were children. The smugness on her face made it clear she had expected this. Jason received Uncle Robert's collection of vintage cars, a collection worth millions. His face lit up with genuine pleasure. He had always admired those cars. Heather was given the art collection, which included works by several renowned contemporary artists. She clasped her hands together in delight. Lawrence Davenport received a significant portion of shares in the Mitchell Group, along with a personal letter that Mr. Peterson handed to him. Various other relatives and friends received smaller bequests, personal artifacts, books, watches, and other memorabilia that held sentimental value. Throughout the proceedings, I sat quietly, waiting for my name to be called. I truly didn't expect much, perhaps one of his cameras or a book of photography he had owned. Just something to remember him by. Finally, Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and looked in my direction. "To my niece, Dana Mitchell, I leave the sum of $10. The room went silent for a moment, and then someone snickered. The snicker turned into a chuckle, which spread around the table until most of my relatives were laughing openly. $10. Jason exclaimed, not bothering to hide his amusement. "What are you going to do with that fortune, Dana? Buy yourself a fancy coffee?" Heather at least had the decency to look embarrassed, though I caught the slight twitch of her lips as she suppressed her own laughter. Aunt Margaret didn't laugh. She simply looked at me with a mixture of pity and vindication. "Well, Dana, perhaps this will help you understand the value of practical career choices." The humiliation burned through me like acid. $10. It wasn't about the money, it was the message. The public declaration that I was worth less than Uncle Robert's gardener, who had received a generous $5,000 bequest. "I assume you have the check prepared?" I asked Mr. Peterson. struggling to keep my voice steady. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. It will be provided after the conclusion of the reading. I wanted to leave immediately, to escape the smirking faces and the heavy weight of judgment. But something made me stay. Pride, perhaps. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me run away in tears. As the reading continued with discussions of some minor properties and investments, I sat frozen in my chair, my mind racing with confusion and hurt. Uncle Robert had said he was proud of me. Had that been a lie? Or was this $10 bequest some kind of final lesson? A reminder that I had chosen to make my own way without family support? Whatever the reason, it felt cruel. It felt like public humiliation. And it confirmed everything I had always feared, that to the Mitchells, I was nothing but a disappointment. By the time Mr. Peterson concluded the formal reading, I had composed myself enough to stand and gather my belongings. The $10 check burned in my hand like a brand of shame. I had tucked it into my wallet without looking at it, wanting only to escape the stifling atmosphere of judgment and smug satisfaction. As I made my way toward the door, snippets of conversation followed me like stinging insects. I thought Robert might leave her something out of pity, Aunt Margaret was saying to Lawrence. He always had a soft spot for strays. $10 won't even cover her parking today. Jason laughed, not bothering to lower his voice. I paused at the door, memories flooding back unbidden. Uncle Robert at my college graduation, standing somewhat apart from the rest of the family, but giving me a thumbs up when I received my diploma. Uncle Robert defending my choice to my parents, saying, "The world needs artists as much as it needs business people." Uncle Robert calling on my birthday every year without fail, even when my own cousins forgot. Had it all been meaningless? Had I imagined the connection, the subtle support? My friends had always been skeptical of my relationship with Uncle Robert. "He's just like the rest of them," my best friend Zoe would say. "If he really supported you, he'd help you financially." I had always defended him. "He respects that I want to make it on my own," I'd insist. "He understands me better than the rest of them." Now I felt foolish, naive. The black sheep who had desperately wanted to believe that at least one member of the flock saw value in her difference. The hurt was transforming into anger now. A slow burn that started in my chest and radiated outward. I had wasted years seeking approval from a family that would never give it. I had defended a man who had ultimately used his final act to humiliate me. I was almost out the door when Heather caught up to me. "Dana, wait." I turned, not bothering to hide my red eyes or tight jaw. "I am sorry about that," she said, gesturing vaguely back toward the conference room. It was unkind of Jason to laugh. "But not unkind of you," I challenged. Heather had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't mean to." "Look, Dana, you know how Uncle Robert was. He was always testing people, teaching lessons." "And what lesson was this supposed to teach me, Heather? That I should have played your game? Abandoned my dreams to fit the Mitchell mold?" "Maybe," she said softly. "You know it's not too late. You're still family. You could come work for the company. Learn the business." The suggestion was so absurd, so perfectly illustrative of how little she understood me, that I almost laughed. "I don't want your life, Heather. I never have." Before she could respond, Jason approached, casually sliding his car keys into his pocket. The keys to his newly inherited vintage car collection. "Hey, cuz," he said with the fake warmth he reserved for business associates and women he was trying to impress. "Don't take it so hard. If you need a loan or something, I could help you out." The condescension in his voice was the final straw. "I don't need or want your money, Jason. Unlike you, I've actually built something on my own, without riding on Uncle Robert's coattails." His face darkened. "You ungrateful little..." "Jason." Aunt Margaret's sharp voice cut through his brewing tirade. She had approached without me noticing. "That's enough. Dana has made her choices, and now she must live with them. Just as Robert made his choice clear today." I looked at the three of them standing there, my family by blood, but strangers in every way that mattered. "You know what? You're right. Uncle Robert did make his choice clear. And I'm making mine. Goodbye." I turned to leave again when Mr. Peterson's voice called from the doorway. "Ms. Mitchell?" A moment, please, before you go. The family exchanged curious glances. There are some additional papers you need to sign, Mr. Peterson explained, his expression unreadable. Jason snorted. Probably a waiver promising not to contest the will for more than your $10. I ignored him, debating whether to stay or just walk out. Something in Mr. Peterson's eyes, a quiet intensity one hadn't noticed before, made me hesitate. It won't take long, he added. Fine, I said, my curiosity overcoming my desire to escape. We'll wait for you. Dana, Aunt Margaret said, though her tone suggested this was more about propriety than actual concern. That won't be necessary, Mr. Peterson interjected smoothly. This may take some time. And I'm sure you all have pressing matters to attend to. And Margaret looked like she wanted to object, but Lawrence placed a hand on her arm. Margaret. We do have that meeting with the board at 1. Perhaps we should go prepare. With visible reluctance, Aunt Margaret nodded. Very well. Dana. We'll be in touch about the memorial service arrangements. I doubted that, but I nodded anyway, relieved that they would be leaving. As the family gathered their belongings and filed out, I stood awkwardly by the door, wondering what additional humiliation awaited me in these papers I needed to sign. I had no idea that my life was about to change forever. The heavy door closed behind my departing family with a definitive click. Mr. Peterson waited a moment, head tilted as if listening for retreating footsteps, before he turned to me with an entirely different expression than he had worn during the will reading. The solemn mask had fallen away, replaced by something that looked almost like anticipation. Miss Mitchell, Dana, if I may please come back to the conference room. Confused but intrigued by this change in demeanor, I followed him back to the massive table where moments ago I had received my $10 insult. The young associate who had been present earlier was now gone. Please sit down, Mr. Peterson gestured to a chair not at the end where I had been before, but at the head of the table, Uncle Robert's symbolic position. When I hesitated, he nodded encouragingly. It's quite appropriate, I assure you. Once I was seated, Mr. Peterson took a chair to my right and reached into his portfolio, extracting a sealed envelope that looked different from the formal documents he had been reading from earlier. This was a personal stationery envelope with my name written on it in what I immediately recognized as Uncle Robert's distinctive handwriting. Before I give you this, Mr. Peterson said, I want to explain something. I have been the Mitchell family attorney for over 30 years. I worked with your grandfather and then with your uncle. In all that time, I have never seen a more carefully constructed plan than what Robert put together in the final months of his life. Plan? I echoed, thoroughly confused now. Your uncle was diagnosed with terminal cancer 8 months ago, Mr. Peterson said gently. He chose to keep this private, telling only me and his doctors. He used his remaining time to, well, I believe his letter will explain better than I can. He handed me the envelope. It was heavier than I expected, and I turned it over in my hands, noticing the wax seal with Uncle Robert's personal signet ring imprint. Should I? I gestured to the seal. Please, Mr. Peterson nodded. And take your time. I'll be right outside when you're finished. He rose and quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and withdrew several pages of thick stationery covered in Uncle Robert's elegant script. I began to read. My dearest Dana, if you're reading this, then the rather theatrical first act of my will reading has concluded. I imagine you're feeling hurt, confused, and probably quite angry with me right now. For that, I am truly sorry. The public bequest of $10 was a necessary deception, and by the time you finish this letter, I hope you'll understand and forgive an old man's final manipulation. First, you should know that you are, in fact, the primary beneficiary of my estate. The public bequests your family received today represent less than 20% of my total assets. The remaining 80%, approximately $340 million, along with my personal properties, my majority stake in the Mitchell Group, and various other holdings are now yours. But money without purpose is a prison, Dana. I've watched it trap and transform members of our family for generations. I've seen how it warps relationships, priorities, and even one's sense of self. The Mitchells have a particularly virulent case of what I call wealth sickness, the belief that net worth and personal worth are identical. You were the only one who escaped this fate. You chose passion over prestige, purpose over prosperity. I have watched your journey with immense pride, even when I didn't show it publicly. Your photography is exceptional not just technically, but because it reveals a soul behind the lens who sees the world with compassion and clarity. Now, you might be wondering, if I am so proud of you, why the charade today? Why let you believe, even for a short time, that I had dismissed you with a token bequest? The answer is twofold. First, I needed to protect you. Had the family known you were inheriting the bulk of my estate, they would have immediately set about trying to influence you, control you, or contest my wishes. The revelation coming after they've accepted their own bequests offers some legal protection as well as allowing you time to prepare for their inevitable reactions. Second, and perhaps more importantly, I needed you to hear their unfiltered responses. No masks, no pretense. Just their true feelings, revealed in a moment when they believed there would be no consequences to showing them. Information is power, Dana. Now you know exactly who they are. What you might not know is who I really am. Or was. The public face I showed the world, Robert Mitchell, business tycoon, was only part of my identity. In private, I had another passion. I collected art not just to display wealth, but because I genuinely loved it. And for the past 5 years, I have been your most devoted collector. The name Patrick Sullivan is probably unfamiliar to you. It was my pseudonym, under which I purchased your work from galleries across the country. Every major sale you've made since you began showing professionally, I was your buyer. I have a private gallery in my Beacon Hill home filled with your photographs. Mr. Peterson will give you the key. I didn't do this out of pity or charity. I did it because your work moves me. It shows the world as it is, not as we wish it to be or fear it might become. There is truth in your photographs, Dana. Never doubt their value or yours. Now, about your inheritance. Yes, you are wealthy now, extraordinarily so. But with that wealth comes responsibility. The Mitchell Group employs thousands of people. Your decisions will affect their lives. I'm not asking you to become a businesswoman overnight, or ever if that's not your path. The company has excellent management in place. But I am asking you to be conscious of the power you now hold. There are conditions to your inheritance, though minimal ones. 1. You must continue your work as a photographer for at least 10 years. This is non-negotiable. If you abandon your art, the entire inheritance reverts to a selection of charities listed in the formal will. 2. You must take an active interest in the Mitchell Foundation, the charitable arm of our company. How you shape its future giving is up to you, but I hope you'll use it to support the arts and artists like yourself who need space and resources to create. 3. Finally, and this is more request than condition, be wise about who you trust. Money changes how people see you. It will change how you see yourself if you're not careful. Find people who valued you at $10, not just at 10 million. Mr. Peterson has all the legal details and will help you navigate the transition. He is one of the few people I have trusted implicitly throughout my life. Let him guide you, at least initially. I wish I could be there to see the woman you will become with these new resources at your disposal. I wish we had been closer throughout my life. The distance I maintained was partly to protect you from family politics and partly, I admit, from my own discomfort with emotional intimacy, a Mitchell family trait I never quite overcame. Know that I have always loved you, and that this inheritance is not just about money. It's about legacy. Not the Mitchell legacy of properties and portfolios, but a new legacy that you will define. One built on authenticity, compassion, and creative vision. The $10, by the way, was the exact amount my father gave me when I told him I wanted to start my own company instead of working for his. He said it would be all I'd ever get from him. It was both a punishment and the best gift he ever gave me. It forced me to build something on my own terms. Frame the check instead of cashing it. Let it remind you that true worth isn't counted in dollars. With love and faith in your journey. Your Uncle Robert. I read the letter twice, tears streaming down my face by the second reading. Emotions crashed through me in waves too complex to name. Grief for the deeper relationship we might have had if he'd shared more of himself. Anger at the public humiliation he had orchestrated. Even understanding his reasons. Relief that my instincts about him hadn't been wrong after all. And overwhelming shock at the magnitude of what he had left me. $340 million. Majority ownership of the Mitchell Group. Properties I didn't even know he owned. I was still trying to process it all when Mr. Peterson knocked gently and re-entered the room. He was Patrick Sullivan, were the first words out of my mouth. Mr. Peterson smiled. Yes, he was quite pleased with that little deception. He would go to your gallery openings in disguise, sometimes a hat and glasses, very cloak and dagger. He was enormously proud of you, Dana. Why didn't he just tell me? Robert was complicated. He believed that making your own way, without family influence or support, would forge a stronger character. But he couldn't bear to see you struggle too much. So he found a way to support you that wouldn't undermine your independence. He sat down beside me again. There's more you should know. The private gallery I mentioned is in a penthouse apartment on Beacon Hill that no one in the family knows about. It was Robert's personal retreat. The entire space is filled with your work, arranged chronologically. It's quite moving to see your artistic evolution through his eyes. I shook my head, still struggling to reconcile the uncle I knew with this secret collector of my photography. He knew he was dying for months? He never said anything. Robert faced death as he faced life on his own terms. He spent those months putting his affairs in order, including this rather elaborate plan for his will. He wanted to ensure that his wealth would not only be passed to the person he deemed most worthy, but that it would be a force for good rather than division. Another realization hit me. He was testing them today. My family. He wanted to see how they would react. Mr. Peterson nodded solemnly. And how you would react as well. He once told me, Dana is the only genuine person in the family. I need to make sure money doesn't change that. I looked down at the letter again, at Uncle Robert's distinctive signature at the bottom. A wave of determination washed over me. I would not let him down. I would use this unexpected gift with the same integrity I had tried to bring to my photography. What happens now? I asked. Now, Mr. Peterson said, sliding a thick folder across the table, we begin the process of transferring assets into your name. And you decide how and when to tell your family about the actual terms of your inheritance. I thought about Aunt Margaret's dismissive comments, Jason's mocking laughter. Even Heather's condescending suggestion that I come work for the family business. I think, I said slowly, that they can wait a little while to find out. Mr. Peterson's eyes twinkled. I believe your Uncle Robert would approve of that decision. As the reality of my new situation began to sink in, I felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and terror. My life had completely transformed in the space of an hour. Everything I thought I knew about Uncle Robert, about my place in the family, about my future had been appended. But one thing remained clear: I would honor his faith in me. Not just by meeting the conditions of the inheritance, but by remaining true to myself in the face of extraordinary change. The $10 check was still in my wallet. Mr. Peterson was right, I would frame it rather than cash it. A reminder that sometimes what looks like rejection is actually the beginning of something far more valuable than money, truth. The week following the will reading passed in a blur of meetings, paperwork, and revelations. Mr. Peterson introduced me to a team of financial advisors, attorneys, and management consultants who would help me navigate my new position as the majority shareholder of the Mitchell Group and beneficiary of Uncle Robert's vast personal fortune. Patricia Reynolds. The financial advisor Mr. Peterson had personally selected was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had a gift for explaining complex financial concepts in accessible terms. Your uncle's estate is more diverse than most, she explained during our first meeting in her downtown office. Beyond the Mitchell Group shares, which are worth approximately $200 million, you now own commercial real estate in 5 states, a significant portfolio of blue-chip stocks and bonds, private equity stakes in several tech startups, and of course, the physical properties residential and commercial. I sat across from her, still wearing the same style of clothes I'd always worn, jeans and a simple blouse, feeling like an imposter. It's overwhelming, I admitted. Patricia nodded. It would overwhelm anyone. But we'll take it step by step. Your uncle left very clear instructions about the transition. He wanted you to have time to adjust to your new circumstances without feeling pressured to make immediate decisions about the business. What about my family? When will they find out? That's entirely up to you, Patricia said. Legally, the transfer of shares will become public knowledge within 30 days when the SEC filings are completed. But you could inform them sooner if you wish. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to call Aunt Margaret immediately to hear the shock in her voice when she learned the truth. But a wiser part recognized that such an impulse came from a place of hurt and vindictiveness, not who I wanted to be. I'll wait, I decided. I need time to figure out how I'm going to handle this. I don't want to react emotionally. Patricia nodded approvingly. A wise choice. In the meantime, we should discuss your immediate financial needs and how you want to structure your personal accounts. By the end of the meeting, I had a new checking account with $100,000 in it for immediate expenses, Patricia had said casually, as if that were a normal amount for groceries and rent. A credit card with a limit higher than what I used to make in a year, and a preliminary outline of how my various assets would be managed. I went home to my small apartment that night feeling like I was living in a strange dream. Nothing had physically changed: the same worn furniture, the makeshift darkroom, the stack of photography magazines on the coffee table, but everything felt different. I was different. The most surreal moment came the next day when Mr. Peterson took me to Uncle Robert's secret Beacon Hill penthouse. It was in one of Boston's most exclusive buildings, a historic brownstone that had been converted into luxury condominiums. The doorman greeted Mr. Peterson by name and showed us to a private elevator that required a key to operate. Your uncle purchased this under his Patrick Sullivan alias, Mr. Peterson explained as we ascended. Even the building management doesn't know who really owned it. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and I gasped when I stepped out. The space was incredible, a massive open-concept living area with soaring ceilings and walls of windows overlooking Boston Common. But what took my breath away were the photographs, my photographs covering nearly every wall. They were beautifully framed and professionally lit, arranged in chronological order from my earliest student work to my most recent series. It was like walking through a museum dedicated to my artistic journey. He collected everything, I whispered, moving from image to image. Some I recognized as pieces that had sold at galleries, others were from limited edition prints. A few I couldn't even remember creating. They must have been student work that somehow found its way to him. The Patrick Sullivan purchases were only part of it, Mr. Peterson said, watching me with a gentle smile. He had other aliases for buying your work when he didn't want to raise suspicions by having the same collector acquire too many pieces. In the center of the main room was a large desk with a leather portfolio placed precisely in the middle. He left that for you as well, Mr. Peterson said. I'll give you some privacy. Inside the portfolio was a collection of my images that had never been published or exhibited, early work, experimental pieces, even some personal photographs I had taken during family events. Along with them was another note from Uncle Robert. Art is truth told by deception. The camera lies to tell an honest story. Perhaps my own deception can be forgiven if it leads you to your truth. This space is yours now, a studio, a gallery, a home if you wish it to be. I hope you'll use it to create without limitations. That night, I slept in Uncle Robert's secret penthouse. Surrounded by my own work and the evidence of his secret support, it felt right, somehow a bridge between my old life and whatever came next. 2 weeks after the will reading, Aunt Margaret hosted a dinner ostensibly to discuss Uncle Robert's memorial service. I knew the real purpose was to solidify her position as the new family matriarch and to begin sorting out the new power dynamics now that Uncle Robert was gone. I debated not attending. I didn't owe them my presence, especially after their behavior at the will reading. But curiosity won out. I wanted to see them while armed with the knowledge they didn't yet have. I arrived at Aunt Margaret's Brookline mansion fashionably late, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress that I'd purchased with my new credit card. It wasn't ostentatiously expensive, but it was well made and fit perfectly, a small upgrade that gave me confidence without broadcasting the change in my circumstances. The family was gathered in the formal living room when I arrived. Conversation paused momentarily as heads turned to assess me. I saw the subtle evaluations in their eyes, my clothes, my hair, my demeanor all being silently judged and categorized. "Dana," Aunt Margaret said with practiced warmth. "How nice of you to join us. We were just discussing the memorial service arrangements." "Sorry I'm late," I said, accepting the glass of wine a server offered me. "I had a meeting that ran long." "A meeting?" Jason asked with poorly concealed amusement. "Did someone finally decide to buy one of your photos?" Before, a comment like that would have made me flush with embarrassment and anger. Now, knowing what I knew, I simply smiled. "Something like that." My calm response seemed to unsettle him more than any retort would have. He frowned slightly, trying to read the change in me. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, with Aunt Margaret taking the head of the table, the position that had been Uncle Robert's. I noted the symbolism without comment. Let her enjoy the illusion of succession for now. Throughout the meal, I observed my family with new eyes. The petty power plays, the subtle competitions, the performance of wealth and sophistication, it all seemed so transparent now. They were playing a game whose rules I had finally learned, just as I had decided not to play anymore. "Dana, you're quiet tonight," Lawrence Davenport commented midway through the main course. "Usually by now you'd be telling us about some artistic project or other." I took a sip of wine. "I'm working through some changes in my professional direction," I said truthfully. "It's taking a lot of my focus right now." "Changes?" Heather perked up. "Are you finally considering my suggestion about joining the company? I'm sure we could find a position in marketing or communications that would suit your creative inclinations." The condescension in her tone was exactly what I had come to expect. But now it almost amused me rather than wounding me. "No, nothing like that," I said. "But thank you for the concern." "Well, whatever it is. I hope it's more practical than chasing gallery showings," Aunt Margaret said. "Robert's passing should be a reminder to all of us about the importance of security and family legacy." I raised my glass slightly. "To family legacy," I said. "And to Uncle Robert, who understood its true meaning better than anyone." Confusion flickered across several faces at my cryptic toast, but they raised their glasses nonetheless. After dinner, as coffee was being served in the living room, Jason cornered me by the fireplace. "Okay, what's going on with you?" he demanded. "You're different. Did something happen after we left the will reading?" I looked at my cousin, my blood relation, who had laughed at my supposed misfortune without a second thought. "Life is full of surprises, Jason," I said. "Sometimes things aren't what they seem." "What does that mean? Did Peterson give you something else from Uncle Robert? Was there another bequest?" His rapid questions confirmed what I'd suspected. He was worried there was something he didn't know, something that might threaten his comfortable assumptions. "If there was," I said carefully, "do you think you deserve to know about it after how you behaved at the reading?" His face flushed. "That was just, look, we were all emotional that day. You can't hold a little laughter against me." "Can't I?" I replied, my voice level. "Interesting. I'll remember that perspective." Before he could respond, I walked away, leaving him staring after me with growing suspicion. Aunt Margaret caught up with me as I was preparing to leave. "Dana," she said, her voice pitched low so others couldn't hear. "What are you not telling us? Did Robert leave you something else?" The directness of her question surprised me. Unlike Jason, Aunt Margaret had always been more calculating. "Why would you think that?" I asked. "Because you're different tonight." Confident. Almost knowing. Her eyes narrowed. "And because Robert always had a soft spot for you. Despite your choices." I met her gaze steadily. If Uncle Robert had wanted you to know everything about his decisions, he would have told you himself. Her lips tightened. We're family, Dana. Whatever secrets you think you have, they'll come out eventually. It would be better for everyone if you were transparent now. Transparency, I repeated. That's an interesting value coming from you, Aunt Margaret. Tell me, have you always been transparent with the family? With Uncle Robert? A flash of something unexpected crossed her face, uncertainty, perhaps even fear. It was gone quickly, replaced by her usual composed expression, but I had seen it. There was something there. Some history I didn't yet understand. Think carefully about your next moves, Dana, she said finally. The Mitchell name carries responsibilities and expectations. I couldn't agree more. I replied, gathering my coat. Uncle Robert taught me that in his own way. As I left the mansion and stepped into the cool evening air, I felt a strange mixture of power and responsibility settling over me. I had information they didn't, resources they couldn't imagine, and a new perspective on the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my life. For the first time, I was the one with the advantage. The question now was how I would use it. 6 months after the will reading, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The SEC filings had become public, and with them, the news that I was now the majority shareholder of the Mitchell Group. The family's reaction had been exactly as expected: shock, outrage, and then rapid attempts to realign themselves with me. Aunt Margaret had been the first to call, her voice strained with forced pleasantness. Dana, darling, we need to talk. There seems to have been some confusion about Robert's intentions. No confusion, Aunt Margaret, I had replied calmly. His intentions were perfectly clear. After the initial wave of family drama had subsided, or at least gone underground, I had begun implementing the vision that had been forming since I first read Uncle Robert's letter. The first major project was the creation of the Dana Mitchell Gallery, a space dedicated to showcasing emerging photographers who, like me, had talent but lacked connections and resources. I purchased a former warehouse in Boston's SoHo Arts District and worked with architects to transform it into a state-of-the-art exhibition space with studios available for artists in residence. Patricia had initially raised her eyebrows at the investment. You understand this is unlikely to be profitable, at least in the conventional sense. Profitability isn't the point, I explained. This is about creating opportunities one wish I'd had. Besides, Uncle Robert's letter specifically mentioned using the Mitchell Foundation to support the arts. The Mitchell Foundation had indeed become my primary focus. Previously, it had made safe, tax-advantageous donations to established museums and cultural institutions. I restructured it to focus on arts education in underserved communities, scholarships for young artists, and direct support for working photographers struggling to sustain their practice. My personal life had evolved as well. I moved into Uncle Robert's Beacon Hill penthouse, converting part of it into a working studio while maintaining the gallery space showcasing my work. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could create without financial pressure while still remembering my journey and Uncle Robert's secret support. I continued my photography with a renewed sense of purpose. My latest series explored wealth and identity themes that had become personally relevant in ways I never expected. Ironically, now that I didn't need to sell my work to survive, galleries were even more interested in showing it. I donated all proceeds from sales to the foundation. Not everything was smooth sailing. Of course, the family made several attempts to challenge the will or to pressure me into giving them greater control of the company. Jason was particularly persistent, alternating between attempts to intimidate me and trying to forge an alliance. You're a photographer, Dana, not a businesswoman, he argued during one particularly tense meeting. You need someone with experience to help manage the Mitchell Group. I've been working there for years, I know the operation inside and out. And yet Uncle Robert chose me, I replied. Perhaps he saw something in my perspective that he found valuable. Besides, I'm not managing day-to-day operations, that's what the executive team is for. My role is governance and vision. What I didn't tell him was that I had been studying business, intensively working with tutors, taking courses, reading everything I could about corporate governance and responsible investing. I might not have an MBA, but I was determined to understand the business I now owned. Heather approached me differently. After several awkward attempts at rekindling our cousin relationship, she finally came to me with what seemed like genuine remorse. "I was jealous of you," she admitted over coffee one afternoon in my penthouse. "You had the courage to follow your passion, while I just did what was expected." "You could still change directions," I suggested. "It's not too late." She shook her head. "I wouldn't even know where to start. I've been a Mitchell for so long, I'm not sure who I am without that identity." Her vulnerability surprised me, and over the following months, we began rebuilding a relationship not as Mitchell heirs, but as two women trying to define themselves beyond family expectations. Aunt Margaret remained the most difficult family member to navigate. Her attempts to maintain control of family matters continued, though more subtly now that she understood my position. I kept her at arm's length, remembering Uncle Robert's warning about trust. The most unexpected development in my new life came in the form of Michael Bennett, a journalist who contacted me about an interview for an article on arts philanthropy. He was intelligent, genuinely interested in the work of the foundation, and refreshingly unimpressed by the Mitchell name. "So you're rich now," he said bluntly during our first meeting. "The question is, what are you doing with it that actually matters?" His directness was challenging and exactly what I needed, a perspective untainted by family history or social climbing. We began dating 3 months after that interview, and I faced the complicated question of how much to share about my wealth and when. I opted for transparency relatively early, inviting him to the penthouse for dinner instead of meeting at restaurants as we had been. "Wow," he said, taking in the space and the photographs. "This is not what I expected." "Does it change things?" I asked, suddenly vulnerable. He considered the question seriously. "It changes my understanding of your context," he said finally. "But not how I feel about you." Over time, I came to believe him. Michael treated my wealth as an incidental fact about me, neither the most interesting thing nor something to be ignored. His career was important to him, and he made it clear he had no interest in living off my money. "I like paying for my own stuff," he said simply. "Independence matters to me." I imagine you understand that better than most rich people. I did understand. It was what had driven me to build my photography career without family help, what had earned Uncle Robert's respect, and what continued to guide my decisions despite my changed circumstances. As the 1-year anniversary of Uncle Robert's death approached, I made a discovery that connected me even more deeply to his memory. While going through some old storage boxes in the penthouse, I found a collection of photographs not mine, but his. They were remarkable black and white images of Boston from the 1970s and 80s, showing a side of the city rarely captured in that era: working-class neighborhoods, immigrant communities, street scenes full of life and character. The discovery of Uncle Robert's hidden artistic talent was like finding a missing puzzle piece. It explained his understanding of my passion, his secret support of my career. He hadn't just been a businessman playing at art appreciation, he had been an artist himself, one who had chosen a different path but never lost his creative eye. I decided to honor this connection by including a selection of his photographs in a special exhibition at my gallery. Robert Mitchell. The unseen eye would run alongside works by the emerging photographers I was supporting, creating a dialogue between past and present, between wealth used to create and wealth used to enable creation. As I prepared for the exhibition, I reflected on how far I had come in just 1 year. From struggling photographer to reluctant business owner, from family outcast to powerful philanthropist. The journey had been disorienting at times, but I had tried to stay anchored to the values that had always guided me: authenticity, compassion, and creative integrity. The $10 check from the Will Reading hung framed in my studio, just as Uncle Robert had suggested. Next to it, I placed a simple photo I had taken of him years ago at a family gathering. He wasn't looking at the camera, but gazing out a window, his expression thoughtful and a little sad. I hadn't understood that expression when I captured it, but now I thought perhaps I did. It was the look of someone living a divided life, one part fulfilling expectations, another part nurturing secret passions and hopes. Uncle Robert had found a way to bridge those worlds in his final act. Now it was my responsibility to live fully in both, not divided, but integrated. Wealthy but not defined by wealth. A Mitchell but entirely myself. The anniversary of Uncle Robert's death fell on a perfect autumn day in Boston. Crisp air, golden sunlight. Leaves turning brilliant shades of red and orange in the public garden. It felt like a day for new beginnings rather than somber remembrance, which seemed fitting given the nature of the gallery opening I had planned. Robert Mitchell, the unseen eye, had generated unexpected buzz in Boston's art community. The discovery of a secret photographer in one of the city's most prominent business families was irresistible to local media, and the quality of Uncle Robert's work surprised even seasoned photography critics. These images reveal a profound empathy and technical skill that clearly never found full expression, wrote the Boston Globe's arts reviewer in a preview piece. One wonders how Mitchell's artistic career might have developed had he chosen a different path. I had invited the entire Mitchell family to the opening, unsure who would actually attend. In the year since the will reading, the family dynamics had shifted in complex ways. Some relationships had healed somewhat, while others remained strained or had developed new complications. The gallery space looked spectacular. The main exhibition area featured Uncle Robert's work, large-format black and white prints that showed his eye for composition and human moments. A smaller adjoining gallery showcased 6 emerging photographers who had received the first round of grants from the Mitchell Foundation. My own work was displayed in a third space, creating a visual conversation across 3 generations of photography: my uncle's hidden passion, my established practice, and the fresh perspectives of artists just beginning their journeys. I arrived early to oversee the final preparations, walking through the transformed warehouse with a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. Michael joined me shortly after, looking handsome in a suit that he'd insisted on buying himself despite my offers to help. "This is incredible, Dana," he said, taking in the space. Robert would have been proud. "I hope so," I replied. Sometimes I still feel like I'm trying to solve a puzzle he left behind. Like there are pieces of his intentions I haven't fully understood yet. Michael squeezed my hand. "Maybe that's the point. He gave you resources and possibilities, not a roadmap. The choices are yours to make." The gallery began filling with guests, art critics, photographers, local cultural figures, and eventually, family members. Aunt Margaret arrived first, elegant as always in a tailored navy suit, her eyes sweeping critically over the space before settling on me. "Dana," she said, air-kissing my cheeks. "This is unexpected." "Thank you for coming, Aunt Margaret," I replied sincerely. "It means a lot to have family here." She nodded, then gestured to the photographs. "I had no idea Robert took these. He never mentioned any interest in photography." "I don't think he felt he could," I said. The family had certain expectations. Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, or regret. "Yes," she said quietly. "We did." Jason arrived with his new girlfriend, a sleek blonde who worked in finance and seemed utterly bored by the art. He had been keeping his distance since our last confrontation over company matters, but tonight he made an effort at civility. "Nice place," he said, looking around. "Though I still don't understand why you'd spend millions on a warehouse when you could have used existing gallery space." "Because this isn't just about displaying art," I explained. "The building includes studios, darkrooms, and teaching spaces. It's a community resource, not just an exhibition venue." He shrugged, clearly not getting it, but at least he wasn't openly hostile. Progress of a sort. Heather came alone and spent genuine time looking at each photograph, particularly Uncle Robert's. When she reached me, her eyes were damp. "I never knew him," she said softly. "Not really. None of us did, I think." "I'm still getting to know him," I admitted. "These photographs showed me a side of him I never saw when he was alive." "Do you think he was happy?" Heather asked. Living the life that was expected of him instead of pursuing this? It was a profound question, one I had been asking myself throughout the process of curating his work. I think he found ways to express his true self, even within constraints, I said carefully. And I think his gift to me was the chance to live without those same constraints. The evening progressed with speeches, champagne, and the satisfying buzz of people engaging deeply with the photographs. Critics took notes, collectors inquired about purchases, all proceeds would go to the foundation, and most importantly, the emerging artists whose work was featured had the opportunity to discuss their vision with an influential audience. Near the end of the event, Mr. Peterson appeared at my side, looking somewhat out of place among the artsy crowd in his conservative suit. "Ms. Mitchell," he said formally, though his eyes were warm. "Your uncle would have been pleased and somewhat mortified to have his private work so publicly displayed." I laughed. "I know, but I think he would have understood why it mattered to share it." "Indeed, Mr. Peterson glanced around to ensure we weren't overheard, then lowered his voice. "I have something for you. Robert asked me to deliver it on the anniversary of his passing." He handed me a small envelope similar to the one I had received at the will reading. My name was written on it in Uncle Robert's handwriting. "Should I?" I gestured toward a quiet corner. "Please," Mr. Peterson nodded. "I'll make sure you're not disturbed." I slipped away from the crowd and found a private moment to open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, with just a few lines written in Uncle Robert's distinctive script. "Dana, a year has passed. You face the immediate challenges of wealth and family expectations. The harder work now begins holding on to yourself amidst comfort, maintaining purpose when necessity no longer drives you. Remember, money makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Let it serve your vision, not define it. With enduring faith in your journey. R." I read the note twice, then carefully tucked it away. Uncle Robert was right, as usual. The past year had been about adjustment and reaction. The real test would be what came next, when the novelty had worn off and the day-to-day reality of my new life became routine. Rejoining the event, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The gallery was just the beginning. There were so many possibilities for meaningful action: the Foundation's work, my own photography, even potential reforms within the Mitchell Group itself. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing with Aunt Margaret in front of one of Uncle Robert's most powerful photographs, a dignified older woman sitting on the steps of her triple-decker in South Boston. Neighborhood children playing around her. "He always was interested in people's stories," Aunt Margaret said unexpectedly. "That's what made him such a good businessman, I suppose. He could see beyond the surface." Yes, I agreed. He could. She turned to me, her expression more open than I had ever seen it. "I won't pretend to understand his decision to leave the company to you. But after seeing his true perspective, perhaps I'm beginning to." It wasn't an apology or even a complete reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement. A small bridge across the chasm that had always existed between us. "Would you like to come to dinner next week?" I asked impulsively. "Just the two of us?" "I'd like to hear more about him from your perspective." Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something that might have been gratitude. "I'd like that," she said simply. As the last guests departed and Michael helped the staff begin cleaning up, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The Boston skyline glittered against the night sky, the old city and the new coexisting in architectural harmony. A year ago, I had been Dana Mitchell, struggling photographer and family disappointment. Now I was Dana Mitchell, gallery owner, philanthropist, business leader, and still a photographer. Still finding my way through the viewfinder of my camera. What Uncle Robert had given me wasn't just wealth. It was possibility. The possibility to define success on my own terms, to create opportunities for others, to maintain my authentic self even as my circumstances changed dramatically. The $10 inheritance that had initially seemed like such a cruel joke had indeed been the key to something far more valuable than money: freedom. Freedom from financial worry, yes. But more importantly, Freedom from the need to prove my worth to a family that measured value in dollars and status. That freedom came with responsibility, of course. To use resources wisely. To create rather than merely consume. To remain grounded in the values that had guided me before wealth complicated everything. As I looked out over the city, I felt both the weight and the lift of that responsibility. There would be challenges ahead: family tensions, business decisions, the ongoing navigation of new relationships. But for the first time since Uncle Robert's death, I felt fully capable of meeting those challenges not just as his heir, but as myself. I thought about what Uncle Robert had written in his final note. Money as servant, not master. Vision as the driving force, not comfort or status. In the end, perhaps that was his greatest legacy, not the millions he left me, but the example he set of a life lived authentically even within constraints. He had found ways to pursue his passion for photography quietly, without fanfare. He had used his wealth to support art he believed in, including mine. He had maintained his own perspective in a family that valued conformity. I returned to the gallery where Michael was waiting. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But tonight, surrounded by 3 generations of photographic vision, Uncle Robert's, mine, and the emerging artists we were supporting, I felt a profound sense of continuity and purpose. The true inheritance wasn't in the bank accounts or property deeds. It was in the perspective that allowed me to see beyond surface value to deeper meaning. It was in the courage to follow my own path. It was in the understanding that wealth was a tool, not an identity. What would you do if you suddenly inherited millions? Would you stay true to yourself, or would the money change you? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about finding authenticity in challenging circumstances. And if you know someone who might need this reminder about what truly matters, share this video with them. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't counted in dollars. Hashtag SEO YouTube description, 155 words. Unexpected inheritance turns family humiliation into sweet justice in one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll ever hear. When Dana's wealthy uncle leaves her just $10 at his will reading, her family's mockery cuts deep. Little did they know, this apparent insult was actually setting up one of the ultimate revenge stories of family vindication. With 340 million reasons to smile, Dana navigates her new reality, while family members who once laughed scramble to get back in her good graces. This tale combines elements of classic revenge stories with profound lessons about authenticity and true worth. Unlike typical revenge stories that end in bitterness, Dana's journey reveals how success and integrity make the best revenge. Perfect for fans of karma, comeuppance, and family drama. If you enjoy satisfying revenge stories where kindness ultimately prevails, this emotional roller coaster will leave you cheering for the underdog who gets the last laugh.